Joining us now is John Brennan, former director of the CIA. He is an MSNBC senior national security and intelligence analyst and the author of Undaunted, My Fight Against America's Enemies at Home and Abroad. Director Brennan, good evening.
Good evening, Joshua.
What do you make of this report? I feel like it says things that we all kind of knew and or suspected for a long time, and we're just kind of wondering if and when the U.S. government would just say them out loud.
Well, I agree with you, Joshua. I don't think there was anything really new that came out in this declassified intelligence assessment. It holds Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, responsible for the murder and the horrific dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, who at the time was a resident of the United States and a columnist for the Washington Post. But I think we are still to hear from the Biden administration about what accountability Mohammed bin Salman will have for this murder, because it's quite clear to me that although the assessment says that he ordered the capture or killing of Jamal Khashoggi, I believe that those Saudi agents that actually conducted the murder did so at the direction of Mohammed bin Salman. It's been my experience working many years with the Saudis that they would not have carried out that type of act without the explicit authorization from on high. And indeed, that declassified assessment says that Mohammed bin Salman's underlings would not have carried out such a sensitive operation without the Crown Prince's explicit orders. So again, I think there's still some reckoning and some accountability that has to be meted out for the Crown Prince's order to kill Jamal Khashoggi.
Can we talk a bit about the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia? Chuck Todd asked Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau about the Canadian-Saudi relationship on Meet the Press, and Mr. Trudeau was very measured in the way he described that relationship. Watch.
Is Saudi Arabia an ally to Canada?
No, I wouldn't say it. They're a country we do business with. They're a country that we continually advocate for greater transparency, greater human rights, protection of women, of activists. There are a lot of challenges. They were the host of the G7, the G20 last year, which meant we certainly engaged with them. But I also directly brought up the issue of human rights, and will always do that whenever I engage with people around the world who need to have that highlighted.
So, Director Brennan, what do you think our future relationship with Saudi Arabia is looking like? I think our relationship hinges around a few things: oil and energy, which Saudi Arabia is still a significant producer of, although we're slowly moving away to different sources of energy, and regional security in the Middle East, because they have control of holy sites in Mecca. So what should our relationship be with them?
Well, the United States and Saudi Arabia have had a long-standing strategic partnership that I think is very important to both countries. As you point out, it runs the gamut from energy to security, counterterrorism, and economics. And so therefore, I do think it's important that we maintain the strength of that relationship. However, I don't think we should turn a blind eye at all to things that Saudi leaders do, including Mohammed bin Salman. And therefore, I do think that it has to be, he has to have a clear signal sent to him that carrying out these types of activities, oppressing, suppressing, and ruthlessly killing any Saudi activists who dare to speak out against him is something that shouldn't be tolerated. And I do think we can distinguish between the strategic partnership between our two countries and the actions of one man. And that's why I'm really hoping that the Biden administration is going to hold him accountable, saying that he's not going to come to the United States for any official or personal visits, that he's not going to have senior level meetings with Biden administration officials. This is something that I think has to be made very clear, not just to Mohammed bin Salman and the rest of the Saudi government, but also to other governments throughout the region, that they cannot get away with this because the Biden administration is going to hold them to certain standards in terms of human rights and values. And therefore, I think it's important that the Biden administration carry out not just this, the unclassified assessment saying that he was responsible, but again, holding him accountable and having some then consequences as a result.
This feels like the kind of thing that President Biden and the administration positively has to get right for an array of reasons, not only because of Saudi Arabia's importance just in the Middle East, but also the fact that Saudi Arabia has proxy involvements in other parts of the Middle East, Yemen and elsewhere. It's a major player in the Arab League. It's also it's also got a growing, or not a growing, an evolving profile on the world stage through the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who's been making a name for himself, trying to modernize Saudi Arabia, open it up to different kinds of investments, allowing women to drive cars, things like that. So it feels like there are a whole lot of threads that pull at the same time if President Biden does anything. It feels like the risk of getting something wrong is high.
Yes, and as you point out, there have been some positive developments in Saudi Arabia since Mohammed bin Salman became the de facto day-to-day leader. As you point out, there has been some modernization inside of the kingdom. Women have been allowed to drive, and some other reforms that I think have been long overdue. At the same time, Mohammed bin Salman was the one who directed this military adventure in Yemen that has led to thousands upon thousands of innocent deaths, which has gone on for too long. Now, we need to have this good relationship again with Saudi Arabia. It's very important. Saudi Arabia's stability and its future is important to the United States as we deal with various problems in the Middle East, including the Iranian issue as far as nuclear weapons development is concerned. But again, that does not mean that we should be turning a blind eye to this the way the Trump administration did. And unfortunately, I think Mohammed bin Salman felt as though he could get away with these types of activities because he had such a cozy relationship with the Trump White House. The Biden administration has to let Mohammed bin Salman, and as you point out very rightly, others throughout the region know that there's a new day in Washington right now under the Biden administration. And if they do things like this, there will be accountability.
Last quick question, Director, before I have to let you go. What is America's strongest point of leverage over Saudi Arabia? Do we have any leverage over them?
Well, wait, Saudi Arabia needs us much more than we need Saudi Arabia. Of course, we want them to be a productive force in the region as far as energy, security, other types of things. But the relationship with the United States is critically important to Saudi Arabia. They know that they live in a dangerous neighborhood. You look at Yemen, you look at Syria, Iraq, Iran. The United States is the security guarantor for the kingdom. We will continue to be that. But that doesn't mean that they should take the relationship for granted. And that doesn't mean that we should just, again, turn a blind eye to things that really have no place in a civilized world.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.